Have you ever thought about a man challenging not only a king, but also the heavens? In the next minute, discover how Elijah, against all odds, invokes not only fire from heaven, but also a truth that will shake your beliefs. See how a single man can change the fate of an entire nation, and how this can transform your view of strength and faith. But beware, what you are about to hear may be more surprising and powerful than you can imagine. Elijah, a prominent prophet of the northern kingdom of Israel, witnessed and was an instrument of some of the most extraordinary miracles documented in the sacred scriptures. However, in a subsequent period, he found himself overcome with deep discouragement and fear. Faced with the blatant disobedience of King Ahab, God tasked Elijah with announcing a severe drought over the land. During this arid time, God took care of Elijah in a remarkable way. "I affirm that there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word," said Elijah. "Leave here and go eastward and hide in the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have ordered the ravens to feed you there." Elijah followed the divine guidance and lived by the Kerith ravine, where the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and evening, and he drank from the brook. However, after some time, the brook dried up because there was no rain in the land. God then guided Elijah to the home of a widow severely affected by the drought, who was about to consume the last of her food. God empowered Elijah to assure the widow that her supplies of flour and oil would be miraculously replenished day after day. And so it happened. When the widow's son died, Elijah fervently interceded with God for his resurrection, and the miracle was granted. "Get up and go to Zarephath in Sidon," the Lord instructed. "Stay there. I have commanded a widow there to supply you with food." Elijah obeyed and went to Zarephath. Upon arriving at the town gate, he found a woman gathering sticks. He asked for water, and as she went to get it, he also asked for a piece of bread. She revealed her desperate situation. "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she said, "I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug." Elijah encouraged her. "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." She did as Elijah said, and there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. The jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. However, the widow's son became ill and died. In despair, she confronted Elijah. "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" Elijah took the boy from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, "Look, your son is alive." The woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." Later, God called Elijah to a spectacular challenge against the idolatrous prophets on the top of a mountain. At the decisive moment, while the pagan gods did not respond to the fervent cries of their prophets, it was Elijah's turn. With a sincere prayer, he invoked the true God, who responded with an overwhelming demonstration of power. Fire from heaven consumed the sacrifice on Elijah's altar, even after it had been abundantly soaked with water, proving the supremacy of the God of Israel. Elijah issued a bold challenge: Summon all Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good." Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted, but there was no response, no one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response, no one answered, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water, and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" This remarkable event unequivocally demonstrated the Lord's majesty over the false gods. The crowd witnessed not only the divine fire in Elijah's actions, but also the burning zeal of his ministry and action. Elijah, deeply disturbed by his people's spiritual rebellion and angered by the false prophets of Baal, faced these challenges on Mount Carmel. He opposed the agents of evil, overcoming the disproportionate numerical ratio of 850 to 1. His bravery was unparalleled, reminiscent of ancient times when David faced Goliath. Elijah, like the improbable hero David, confronted his adversaries with indomitable fervor. His focus was fixed on the grandeur of God, not on the number of enemies. This elevated perspective fueled his relentless courage. Courage is essential for any leader, especially those seeking to foster change. Elijah was a reservoir of courage, primarily for his determination that overcame any doubts, even when greatly outnumbered. He was resolute in challenging Baal. Secondly, his desire to honor Yahweh surpassed any fear. Despite the risks, he prioritized his devotion to Yahweh above all else. Finally, his compassion triumphed over his frustration with the people. Despite his repulsion by their conduct, Elijah longed for them to turn back to Yahweh. In solitary prayer atop the mountain, he channeled this courage to call down fire from heaven. The fire in his heart drew divine fire, sealing Baal's defeat. Following this extraordinary display of God's power, Elijah was called to another miracle. He prayed for the end of the drought, and God sent a small cloud that soon turned into a torrential downpour. Despite his triumphs, when Elijah heard that Queen Jezebel had sworn to kill him, he fled to the opposite end of the country and, under a tree, pleaded with God for his own death. This contrasting moment is described in 1 Kings 18:41-46. Elijah said to Ahab, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. "Go and look toward the sea," he told his servant. And he went up and looked. "There is nothing there," he said. 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." The 7th time the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." So Elijah said, "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds, the wind rose, and a heavy rain started falling. Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. After the events on Mount Carmel, Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came, and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu son of Nimshi king over Israel, and anoint Elisha son of Shaphat from Abel-Meholah to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him." As described in 2 Kings 2:11. As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. This spectacular scene illustrates the closeness and power of God. Our humanity is similar to Elijah's. We experience exhaustion, and when the mind and body are tired, we may feel overwhelmed. However, the God who created us, as reminded in Psalm 103:14, knows our frame and remembers that we are dust. He never forgets his promises, even when our memory of his goodness fades. Elijah was aware of the idolatry in Israel and knew that the time of divine judgment had come. He foresaw the drought and famine that would plague the land, for he proclaimed this judgment. This dark period in Israel's history was marked by almost total apostasy and the open and defiant rebellion of the king against the Lord. Imagine the immense courage needed for a man to pray for judgment upon his own people, confront an evil king, and challenge hundreds of false prophets. Elijah, taken up to heaven long ago, still teaches us a valuable lesson today. True leadership sometimes requires loneliness and the courage to express uncomfortable truths. And so, we witness the impressive strength of Elijah, a man who faced kings and heavens with unshakable faith. But this is just one of many surprising stories waiting for you on our channel. Each video is a journey through narratives that challenge the ordinary and reveal profound truths. If you enjoyed uncovering the secrets behind Elijah's courage and faith, imagine what else you can discover with us. Don't miss the opportunity to explore more stories that can transform your worldview. Make sure to subscribe, activate notifications, like and share so you and your friends don't miss any of our incredible journeys. Join us in this ongoing adventure of discovery and inspiration. Until next time.